I read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. The novel has 521 pages, and it begins with Jane Eyre, who lives with her abusive aunt, Miss Reed, and her cousins because both of her parents have died. As she grows up, she moves away and becomes a teacher at Thornfield Hall, where she meets Mr. Rochester. She falls deeply in love with him, and they're about to get married, but she runs away after finding out that he's already married. After many years, she discovered that the hall had burned down, and Mr. Rochester was blind from the terrible accident. After getting back together, they get married, have a child together, and Mr. Rochester gains sight in one eye. For the first quote, this is when Jane was trapped in Mr. Reed's room by Miss Reed. Mr. Reed had died many years before, and Jane was hearing noises that she believed was his ghost. This quote shows a metaphor because it states that her head and heart were beating thick and becoming hot, and this is comparing the two objects to how scared she was. This sets the tone of fear because she doesn't know who else is in the dark room. It's also a short clause because it adds emphasis on how terrified Jane was, and it's imagery because it allows the readers to experience the same distress that she was going through. For my second quote, this is said by Mr. Rochester, and it was one night as Jane was going to bed, and he was going to say, "Good night, my love," and let his true feelings slip for Jane, but he stopped himself just at the last moment. This quote is foreshadowing their future love and marriage, and it's displaying how much Mr. Rochester cares for Jane. It also displays an interrupted sentence because this is bringing out the main clause when he stopped himself at saying good night and then right before my love. The dashes display his conflict and mixed feelings on confessing that he was in love with Jane. He didn't know if he should have told her the truth or still kept the secret to himself. For the third quote, this was also said by Jane when John asked her to leave with him to become a missionary and his wife. She agreed to leave and travel with him but not become his wife. John had gotten upset and he left her, and he wanted her to think about the decision. This quote displays a hyperbole of how intense the situation is. It also helps build anticipation in the reader for what might happen next, and they're both simple sentences because they display that he was very unhappy with her decision in not marrying him. Themes and significance. The first theme is growing up and becoming independent. In the beginning of the novel, Jane was dependent and she was an orphan and she had no money and she was abused by her aunt and cousins. As the novel progressed, she had become an independent woman who made a lot of money, and she had grown in her class rank and she married Mr. Rochester. The second theme is social class and restrictions. Jane was always in a lower status because she was an orphan. She had less rights, less money, she was abused a lot, and she overcame this challenge by becoming well-educated and marrying Mr. Rochester, who was a higher class than her. For my third theme, I have importance of education. Jane believed that women and men should have had the same education and been taught equally. Education was the reason that Jane had grown as an individual and reached a higher status by the end of the novel. And I'm done.